It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell, and today is Friday, November 6th, day 3. We are 3 days out from Election Day, and you know what it's come down to at this point? Everybody just has to look within their own psyche, within their own soul, to figure out where you want to be, because you can take any one of several storylines and choose which one you want to believe in, which one you want to concentrate on, which one you want to put your energies into. It's really more about us at this point, because the pessimist in me will say, the part of me that fear is the guide, here's what I would be afraid of today. The Orange Menace and his minions, first they tried to stop the count, and now that Georgia has tipped its scales in favor of Joe. Oh, by the way, let me stop here for a second. I got to give my daily reminder. I'm recording this pretty early in the morning. By the time you hear it, you'll know more than I do right now. So what I know right now is that Georgia tipped overnight and Joe now leads. It's going to happen in Pennsylvania soon. It's absolutely going to happen in Pennsylvania, probably today. So, strike up the music, the band has begun. The Pennsylvania polka. But here's what I fear. All right, this is the fearful part of me. The Orange Menace and his minions have given up on stop the count, pretty much. Now it's the votes are fraudulent. Of course, it's all a lie. All lies, 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 lies. And things are moving quickly. Things are moving very quickly. They're losing in court. Everything's a joke. We want to laugh them off, but here's the bad news. Faithless electors. They're urging state legislatures, Republican-controlled state legislatures, like in Wisconsin, to nullify the actual vote. They're just coming right out and asking for it. So this is worrisome. They know they can't get to 270 anymore. That's signed, sealed, and delivered. There's no way he gets to 270. As one of my friends posted, the only way he gets to 270 now is if he loses 50 pounds, which I thought was pretty funny. So if you're filled with anxiety and you're that kind of person who really operates on fear, you've got plenty of fuel right now. Governor DeSantis of Florida and others are calling for GOP state legislatures to just ignore the voters, ignore everything, fall in line with this fraud narrative, which is completely fictitious, but it's their little smokescreen. Just yell fraud and instruct your electors to vote Republican. And if they refuse, it's within the power of the state legislatures, I guess. I don't know a lot about this. Don't come to me for expertise. There are plenty of other places you can go that know a lot more about this than I do. But apparently they can just remove electors if they refuse to vote the way they want them to and replace them with their own electors. Now, you're going to hear about state laws that say, well, you have to vote for the popular vote winner. You don't have a choice. Well, that's not actually true. First of all, that's in 33 states, I believe. The other states don't have such laws. And even in the 33 states, some of those 33, I don't have the number in front of me, some of them have no penalty if you break that law. So you can still break it, and there's no penalty. It's kind of like what the Orange Menace does on a daily basis. The kind of like refusing to honor subpoenas, things like that. But yeah, I guess a so-called faithless elector, even though this elector is expected to vote for the popular vote winner in their state, they don't really have to. And even if there's a law, there's no penalty. And even if there is a penalty, it's just a fine. The Republicans can come up with money. They call up the Koch brothers. Oh, one of them, I keep calling them the Koch brothers. One of them's dead now. Wait, I forget which one. Is Charles or anyway? You just call up your donors and say, hey, we need a little legal fund here, which they're outright doing. That's part of the pitch, too. Please contribute now to the Orange Menace Legal Fund. So they know they've lost the vote. They know they've lost the popular vote. They know now that they've lost the Electoral College. They've lost any hope for 270. They've lost any hope they have in the courts. They're not hanging with them. And this is their final gambit. State legislatures mess with your electors. Okay, so if you want to be fearful, if you're that type of personality, there you go. Now, on the other hand, if you're of a more sunny disposition, you're looking at what happened in Georgia last night. Oh, sweet Georgia Brown. No gown maid has got a shade like sweet Georgia Brown. Georgia tipped to Joe. Let's see the latest numbers I've got. As I'm talking to you right now, Joe is up by about 1,000 votes with 99% in. Another 1% to go. It's probably going to jump by another, I don't know. Again, people know more about this than I do. But right now, it's the numbers I'm looking at, 2,449,582. The Orange Menace, 2,448,485. So about 1,000 votes. Just over 1,000. That'll probably go to a couple thousand before it's all said and done. Pennsylvania, strike up the music, the band has begun. Cue that up. Cue up the Pennsylvania polka, because that's going to happen at some point today. Maybe by the time you hear this. With 95% of the expected vote in, Joe is only down by 0.3 percentage points. So that's going to flip. That's going to flip today. And of course, Nevada and Arizona, I've been saying all along, those are in the bank. So really that just leaves North Carolina, and they've got until, next April to count their votes. And I wouldn't be surprised if Joe even takes North Carolina. He's going to sweep the final 5 here. So if you're the type who just likes to keep on the sunny side of life here, there's just no denying this. And this whole faithless elector thing, I don't know. Like my dear old dad always told me, hope for the best, plan for the worst. But the Orange Menace has just been failing miserably through this whole process. I don't know how that doesn't continue. So I'm a realist, but I'm also I'm looking at what's in front of me, and I don't know how, unless they really can convince state Republicans to get on board with this little scheme. Of course, the only way it works is if everybody gets in line with the Orange Menace and his unfounded, that's way too tame of a word, excuse me, his absolute nefarious, bald-faced lies, or bold-faced lies if you prefer. I've looked that up in the past. Apparently both terms are accepted now. Yeah, just absolute fiction. This absolute fictitious narrative about the fraud. I mean, this really is tin pot dictator stuff. Now, again, depending on your personality, you might be the type who's just getting really sad and depressed and stressed out. And who could blame you? Because what happened yesterday in the White House, we've been saying for 4 years, can he go any lower? He just went exponentially lower yesterday with lie after lie after lie, and absolutely defiling the office of the president, defiling that White House podium, the very institution of voting, the one thing that everyone agrees is sacred. From your most radical right-wingers to your most radical lefties, that's the one thing everybody agrees on. The vote is sacred. The only people for whom the vote is not sacred are wannabe dictators and fascists and authoritarians. You got your Putins, you got your Kim Jong-uns, you got your Xi Jinpings. And then you go back in history, you got your Hitlers, you got your Mussolinis. This is how low he's gone. By the way, I was flipping around. I still have ever since election night, I've still got all my devices fired up, and I'm flipping around all the time to see what's what. So I was tuned in when the Orange Menace walks up to the podium and started his little lie fest, his little Il Duce impression. And I immediately tweeted, as soon as it started, networks, do not broadcast this live to the nation. It's nothing but lies. You can tape it, you can play it later with a simultaneous fact check. Now you think day 2 after the election, when the current president comes out to talk to the press, talk to the American people. Yeah, you should cover that, right? Of course. That just goes without saying. Especially it's the first time we've heard from him since election night. Except for Twitter, of course. But it's the first time he's been on camera. It's the first time he's spoken to us. And he's the president. So what are you going to do? You're going to cover it. But like we've been saying for a long time, this is not normal. These are not normal times. He's not a normal president. And so I tweeted immediately, because within the first 30 seconds, just blatant lies. Again, just defiling the presidency, defiling the White House, and just blaspheming the sacred institution of the vote itself. Within 30 seconds. Right out of his mouth. So I just tweeted right away, networks, stop it. What are you doing? You can't live broadcast this guy vomiting his lies. And to my great delight, a couple of the cable networks carried it. But everybody else, all the broadcast networks, a couple of the cable networks, cut them off. It took MSNBC 60 seconds. Nope, we can't do this. I happened to be on NBC, the broadcast network. They lasted maybe 5 minutes at the most. And they cut them off. They go back to Lester Holt and Chuck Todd in the studio. And they're both just shaking their heads, looking at each other. I forget the exact words, but what I heard them say, basically what they said was, I'm sorry, everybody. We just can't do this anymore. He's just lying. Everything out of his mouth is a lie. Let's fact check you. And then they didn't go back. Like, no, we just can't do this anymore. So good for them. Good for the networks. Wow. So, again, there's a little bit of good news, a little bit of bad news. Depending on your personality, you decide how you want to feel about this. I've mostly been pretty happy the last couple of days as I'm seeing the trends. Georgia. Good old Georgia. Good old Stacey Abrams. Man, alive. This woman's got a future. If not for Stacey Abrams, Georgia would not be where it is today. But right now, Georgia, Georgia, the whole day through, just an old sweet song. And Georgia tipped to Joe. And Pennsylvania going to be right behind him. Because Pennsylvania's got the numbers. So I've had these 4 songs going through my mind. Sweet Georgia Brown. And Georgia, Georgia, which is Hoagie Carmichael, by the way. Hoagie Carmichael. Oh, one of my favorite songwriters of all time. Pennsylvania Polka. The Pennsylvania Polka. And and speaking of numbers, the first one that came to my mind was Pennsylvania 65000. If you don't know this one, you got to know. One of the great American songs, Benny Goodman Orchestra. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's just cool, man. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Ba-da-da. Pennsylvania 65000. Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, you know. People who dismiss music because it's old, you have no idea what you're missing. Pennsylvania 65000, one of the coolest grooves of all time. Numbers I've got by the dozen, everyone's uncle and cousin, but I can't live without buzzing. Doo-doo-boop. Pennsylvania 65000. I got a sweetie I know there, someone who sets me aglow there, gives me the sweetest hello there. Doo-doo-doo. Pennsylvania 65000. We don't say how are you, and very seldom, hey, what's new? Instead, we start and end each call with baby confidentially, I love you. Maybe it sounds a bit funny when I'm away with my honey. Here's what I do with my money. Do-do-do. Pennsylvania 65000. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba. Oh. So that's where I am right now. I'm happy. I'm just happy. The cancer is gone. We have cut out this damn tumor. The Orange Menace is done. It's the magical, amazing, disappearing president. Because Georgia has turned. Pennsylvania is next. I wouldn't be surprised if North Carolina turns when it's all said and done. This thing is over. Okay, here's another thing. By the way, if you're so worried and wondering what the deal is with the counts, can I remind you of something? We need to hear this reminder. It's absolutely normal to be counting votes after Election Day. It happens every single election. A little bit more so now because of the pandemic and because of the great numbers of early voting. And different states have different laws that you can't start counting early, so blah, blah, blah. We all have heard this. And, of course, all we hear about are really Pennsylvania and Georgia and Nevada. You know the states. But they're not the only ones counting. It's just that they're close. Alaska only has 56% of the expected vote counted. 56%. Nobody's jumping on Alaska because it's not close in Alaska. Washington State, 93%. Now, many states are 97, 98, even 99. Nobody's 100. Nobody. Not one single state is 100% counted. New Jersey, 72%. Only 72% of votes have been counted in New Jersey. But it's not close, so nobody's concerned. So stop yelling at Pennsylvania. They're at 95%. Neighboring New Jersey is only 72%. So Pennsylvania, they're doing fine. They're at 95. They're right in there with everybody else. North Carolina, 95%. Georgia, 99%. Let's see. Let's look at the other two. Nevada, 89%. And Arizona, only 90%. But still, right in line with other states. Maine is only 90%. Ohio, 90%. So the fact that the votes aren't counted yet is perfectly normal. Stop worrying about that. It's not any indication of shenanigans. It's not any indication of incompetence. Everything is fine. Everything is going, actually, very smoothly. These people are just doing their jobs, and actually they're doing them damn well. And they're being really careful. And we all knew that the day of vote was going to weigh heavily for the Orange Menace. We all knew that the mail-in and early voting was going to weigh heavily for Joe. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew it. And we're just watching it play out. So Georgia has tipped. Pennsylvania will tip. I'm convinced that North Carolina will when it's all said and done. It's going to hold Nevada and Arizona. Joe's going to sweep the final five. I believe it. I'm calling it right now. Call it. Call it. Well, I got to know what we're calling for. Just call it. You know that reference? That's that great scene from No Country for Old Men. Javier Bardem, right? Call it. Call it, man. Call it. So Depending on your personality, that's how you're feeling today. It's more about you than it is about the news. And I got to tell you, I'm mostly just pretty excited. Now, it's going to be a kick in the teeth if DeSantis and Don Jr. and Eric and Rudy and the whole gang get any traction with this faithless elector scheme. Then I got to start eating my words. But I can't imagine. I can't imagine at this point. Oh, speaking of the really, really bad guys. Now, this needs to be said as well. This needs to be said. Again, yesterday's performance from the White House was as low as the Orange Menace has gone by a mile. He's tripled his previous low by defiling the presidency and the institution of the vote the way he did yesterday. It was beyond despicable. Now, here's the thing. Republicans, the entire Republican Party, and I'm talking both the leadership, the rank and file, the base, the voters, everybody right on down to local dog catcher. If you have an R next to your name, you have a responsibility today. And that is to speak up, speak now, speak loudly, unequivocally, 100% disavow not only the words of the Orange Menace, but the Orange Menace himself. You have to completely renounce not only what he said from that White House podium, but you have to renounce the man himself at this point. You have to reject him. You have to wash your hands of this guy. You have to completely disown him. Every single person in this country, if you have an R next to your name, and if you do not loudly, forcefully, and immediately disown the Orange Menace, then I'm taking that to mean that you're with him. Fine. You will forever be known in the history books for the stand you take today. We are in a whole new ballgame right now. What happened last night, right around the dinner hour, the way he likes to do it, evening news time, go out and grab the attention of the nation. He just dropped his pants and dropped a load on any decent idea of what America is. And I don't care if you've been a Republican since the cradle, and if your parents were, and if your grandparents were, and if your great-great-grandparents were, I don't care. If you have an R next to your name today, and you don't immediately disavow what happened yesterday, and disavow the Orange Menace, you are dead to me, and you are marked, tattooed, stained for life, forever inextricably tied to this guy and what he stands for. And you're going to be indelibly carved into history unless you speak out loudly, unequivocally, today, right now. All right. We're off to a weekend, so I want to close with some good news. This has all been the good, the bad, and the ugly today. You decide. How good, how bad, how ugly do you see things? There are plenty of options for everybody. Quick little reminder, just a little math reminder. There are 210 million, approximately, 210 million eligible voters in this country. The Orange Menace got about 70 million votes. When it's all said and done, it's going to be somewhere in that neighborhood. So that's easy math, right? 70 million out of 210 million, 1/3. Now, that's troubling. Don't get me wrong. That's really disturbing that 1/3 of eligible voters. But let's keep this in perspective. It means that 2/3 of eligible voters aren't having it. I keep trying to remind myself because I need to hear this. The good guys outnumber the bad guys. It's just the bad guys are so damn loud. And they have so much power because of gerrymandering and the Electoral College and all the stuff we talk about all the time, right? But I think we can take some solace in this. I think there's hope for the future. The good people outweigh the bad people 2-1, 67% to 33%. And if you include kids, non-eligible voters, the population of the United States is currently about 330 million. Now, when you look at it that way, those 70 million Orange Menace voters represent about 20% of the U.S. population, 1/5. We outnumber them. The good people outnumber the bad people 4-1. 80% to 20%. This is a small number. And they are absolutely desperate. And that's why they're so loud. And that's why they're so, you've heard the metaphor before, right? Wild animal, trapped in a corner, injured, dying, violently clinging to life, lashing out with its final breath. The most dangerous creature you can imagine. What's more dangerous than that? That's what the Orange Menace is. That's what Steve Bannon is. That's what Stephen Miller is. That's what Rudy Giuliani is. That's what Fox News is. They're 20%. We're the 80%. And they're dying and they're clinging. And lost in all of the drama is the fact that the so-called Justice Democrats have expanded. Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, all reelected. They all retain their seats. And joining them, Jamal Bowman and Mondaire Jones of New York, Cori Bush from Missouri, and Marie Newman of Illinois, all of whom have been declared as likely winners. They are all self-proclaimed Justice Democrats. This is the future, and it's happening now. Gains are being made on fundamental levels of government. The last desperate attempts of the deplorables are finding success, yes, but they will be short-lived. It's the dying creature, cornered and lashing out. And yes, they can do a lot of damage, but they have no future. None. Nope. So that's where I am right now. We're going into a weekend where quite likely Georgia and Pennsylvania will be called by the AP and the major networks. And you can strike up the music. The band has begun. The Pennsylvania polka. So I was looking at the lyrics to this song. And how's this for a little kismet? It started in Scranton. It's now number 1. How's that, Joe? Born and raised in Scranton, PA? It started in Scranton. It's now number 1. It's bound to entertain ya. Everybody has a mania to do the polka from Pennsylvania. All right, get it onto your playlist. Everybody get out and dance to the Pennsylvania polka because they're going to call it. They're going to call Pennsylvania at some point. Today, tonight, over the weekend. There's no turning back in Georgia. Joe has already tipped the scales there. So that's where I am. You choose. You want to concentrate on the good, the bad, or the ugly. It's up to you. You got all the choices in the world. All right. There it is. Have a great weekend. It's going to be a momentous weekend, I believe. And I'll talk to you all about it on Monday. This is The Log. I'm Charles Purcell.